You bring them together. It's a very powerful way of managing. So we're going through Boeing, the Boeing plant's unbelievable. They have retrofitted 4 Boeing 747s. So they look like guppies. They're gigantic. And they build the 787 Dreamliner in Italy, Wichita, Korea, and Japan. And they fly these 4 pieces inside these 747 guppies. And they're built so accurately that they slide together. And they then connect them and put in the electronics and build the interiors and do all this stuff. These are the first composite commercial airlines ever built. This is the kind of material used in the B-2 and the F-117 and the F-22 and 35. So remarkable, basically a plastic airplane, but a very hardened plastic that actually is harder than aluminum and lasts longer than aluminum. Very, very interesting stuff. So they took us to one place, and they were showing us a particular workstation. And they said, this currently takes 16 days. Our goal is to get it down to 6 days with the same number of people. And I stood there and I thought to myself, what if the federal government it suddenly came alive, and I'm sharing the story because it came alive. You know, I've been a student of Deming, and I've read and consulted with Peter Drucker, and I know I've talked to Womack on occasion. But suddenly for me it was vivid, and here's why this is such a huge deal. This is actually item 5 in our contract. To get to a balanced budget, Michael George, who's the guy who founded Strong America Now, you can Google Strong America Now. He was one of the founders of Lean Six Sigma. He believes we can save $500 billion a year just by being more modern management. In addition to which, you suddenly change the speed and accuracy and effectiveness of the government, so you improve the whole economy. Because you're not just cutting out waste, you're dramatically improving productivity. So that's the background. But here's why it's a big deal. The only way you get to continuous improvement is by replacing the civil service system, which since 1880 has been the dominant model. So you're talking about a gigantic, fundamental change in the American government. This is not just let's go cut out waste. This is rethink from the ground up. How do we hire you? How do we train you? How do we measure you? How do we pay you? What do we expect from you? It is enormous. And that's a very short summary, but the underlying concept is that you know what you're trying to accomplish, you measure it every day, and you continually look for systematic ways of reducing waste and increasing productivity every day. Fundamentally different than the way we run the offices. Yes, sir?
Yes, would not the fair tax make you a paycheck president by attracting business back on shore in the United States?
Well, the fair tax might. The fair tax is a very interesting idea. I talk with Neil Bortz about this all the time. However, the jump from an income tax-based society to a transaction tax-based society is enormous. And I do not believe you can run a campaign successfully on that transition. What I've told Neil, and it's going to be in the contract, because we're going to add it to, is I'm prepared to ask the Congress to create a 2-year commission where you and have 435 subcommissions in every single congressional district. Spend the entire first year developing the materials online so that every American can take their job, their salary, their circumstance, figure out how it would work if they had a fair tax. And then spend an entire year with town hall meetings in the entire country. And at that point, I think you can begin to have an honest decision, is that where we want to go? But I do not think without that depth of preparation, you could possibly start moving the fair tax, because there are just too many unknowns, and people's eyes would glaze over. I've done this before. I mean, people just stop it. Yes, sir.
You know, when you were speaker back in the mid-90s, you were lucky enough to have a Senate that was also a Republican majority. Chances are, we're hoping that the Senate will flip next year. You get into the White House next year, and what if the Senate hasn't flipped? How can you actually get Harry Reid to come along and get on board with you, where so many others are failing right now because, like, they're not getting drafted.
That could all be, basically, it's how do you work with the Senate if it doesn't become a Republican? First of all, I believe if I'm the nominee, having worked with Reagan in '80, and having worked on the Bush '88 campaign when he was 19 points behind, and ended up beating Dukakis by 54-46, so a 27-point swing. And then having designed the '94 campaign, which is the largest one-party increase in an off-year in American history, I'm reasonably confident if I'm the nominee that the degree to which Obama will be defeated will bring in a dozen or more U.S. senators. And I would run a campaign consciously designed as a team to make sure, because frankly, if you isolate Obama and you drag him down enough, the number one question in every Senate race is, are you voting for Obama? And you go to a Bill Nelson or a Ben Nelson, you say, let's not talk about, are you voting for Obama or not? And if you're voting for Obama, does that mean you think he's honestly the best candidate for president? And they'll just melt. You'll just watch them melt. And we picked up 6 Senate seats in 1980 by a total margin of 75,000 votes. I mean, so these are, but let's go to your example. I don't understand right this minute why the House Republicans aren't passing the Webb-Warner bill, which would allow, and you have my permission to call your delegation and ask them why they don't get it done, which would allow Virginia to develop oil and gas offshore. Okay, now here's a bill introduced by 2 Democratic senators. You then go to Harry Reid and say, wait a second, and they shouldn't amend it. I mean, don't play games. Send exactly their bill over. Now, does Reid then bottle up 2 Democratic senators? The bill is also endorsed by Tim Kaine, the former Democratic National Chairman, just got endorsed by the governors. Or does Reid say, well, you outmaneuvered me. If he brings it up, it's going to pass. Now goes to the White House. With the unemployment rate we currently have, do you think even this president is going to turn down American energy to pay more royalties to the federal government, to create more American jobs? Well, if he does, I don't think he would actually. But if he would veto it, it would just make the campaign so much easier. So I just give you that as a flavor. A couple more. The gentleman in the orange.
Yeah.
No. Guy right there. Then I'll come to you. Guy in the orange first, then you.
Looking back at the history of the United States, and I'm not a historian, but I do know there was a period of time, particularly in early history, when we didn't have a federal government that we got today, we didn't have local governments, we didn't have all of our regulations and all of the things you had to check and all the other stuff. It goes on. Is there any time to roll that back to where we will have a Renaissance economic period with growth and development for a decade or so?
No, for the next half century. I mean, don't go for small things, go for big things. Look, what I tell people over and over is, I'm never going to ask you to be for me. Because if you're for me, you're going to vote, go home and say, I hope Newt fixes it. And that's impossible under our Constitution. I will ask you to be with me. Because it's going to take 8 years of hard work, and I need you next to me. But there's another reason I ask you to be with me. If we apply the 10th Amendment, and we enforce the 10th Amendment, and we shrink Washington bureaucracy, we had better grow citizenship.
That's right.
Because we're returning power back home, and the vacuum's got to be filled.
That's right.
So my only point to you is, can we do that? Yes. Is that in what my campaign is all about? Yes. If you look at the contract, is that the beginning of that scale of shifting? Yes. There's no reason the federal government, if you redesign it correctly, there's no reason it's more than 8 or 9% of the gross domestic product 25 years ago. You're not going to get there in 3 or 4 years, but you can set patterns which get you there over a 20 or 25-year period, and that should be our goal, and I promise to do next.
Electoral college. Various state legislators enacted laws in the larger states to control the electoral college. Do you think it's a good move, or do you think we should stay with the system our founders?
I would frankly prefer to stay with the system that our founders created. I am very worried that you maximize the virtue of stealing votes if you get into a muddled environment. It's much harder today to steal enough votes to affect the presidential campaign. I am very worried if we make it too tempting for the left, you'll be astonished how many people who don't exist will have voted. Two last questions here.
I'm curious as to what your marketing strategy is for getting this movie out. It's very well done, and it's got a lot of good information that people need to hear. but how is it going to be distributed?
Well, Citizens United is responsible for most of the marketing, and we try to use social media, we try to use Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and a variety of things to get people aware of it. And then frankly, go to events like this and have people who either put it on Facebook or send it to their friends. It's been steadily growing. It's a slow process. These are not commercial films in the Hollywood sense, and we don't have $12 million advertising budgets. But the films have continued to move and continue to grow. Yes, sir.
I'm a history teacher as well, and I would love to put something like this in my classroom, but they have slaughtered our standards to the point where we're teaching the most irrelevant stuff. And at this point, I truly believe that we are killing history for our children to the point where they will not comprehend anything that we're teaching. It's become an incomprehensible mess.
Yes.
And until we fix that, I use your active history with some of my students as I can, and it lights them up. But where do you see, how can we fix historical, I know you're a history professor.
Look, I think that the cultural political movement we represent has to be as prepared to change the academy as it is to change Congress or to change judges.
That's right.
And for example, I'm adamant, I'm going to try to get every state legislature to adopt a law that says every student, every year from K through 12, and every year in the public colleges and universities will encounter and spend a day looking at the Declaration of Independence. Now, Reagan, at the end of his career, said, people said that I made great speeches, but actually I made speeches about great ideas.
That's right.
Okay. You introduce young people to, we hold these truths to be self-evident. We are endowed, we are all created equal, and we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. You walk them through that every year at a rising level of complexity. And despite the best efforts of the left to create amnesia, which is what they've done deliberately, they have deliberately tried to create amnesia as a strategy for breaking the will of American culture. And this whole effort, everything we're doing, from the cultural work to the political work, is designed to say, we're now at the crossroads, we get it. You'd like us to cease to be America and become some kind of weird European system, and the answer is no. We're going to go back to being American. Thank you.